Hello folks, Stone Dog here, and now I'm going to put forth my hypothesis of how life got started, while you creationists say that actually the conditions for life would have been, actually the things that would have been created in a primordial ooze, you say, you know, an equal portion of right-handed and left-handed amino acids and tar, and there was oxygen in the atmosphere, and there were these things that were a detriment to the creation of life because they wanted to break down bonds, or they did break down bonds between life. I'm going to give y'all my opinion, and it's going to be through crude drawings, sorry about that, as to how life formed in this midst. In fact, I'm putting forth the hypothesis that if it wasn't for these things that were trying to break down these basic self-replicating molecules, that they wouldn't have been able to do what they did and become life. Now, I want y'all all to imagine that this, and it's like I said, really crude drawing of the primordial soup. These little creatures right here are basic chemicals, okay? All the squiggly lines, like I said, it's a really crude drawing. They're all the amino acids, all that stuff that has disallowed, that you say disallows life to form. Now let me say just once ever, in a blue fucking moon, obviously, a chemical chain comes around that looks something like that, okay? This one right here. And you can't really see, but I just put positive and negative in there. It's because it's basically, just say this is the positive molecule, okay? And all these other ones, they have little pluses and minuses in them. They're only partial, they're all very small compared to this one. But just let's say this one somehow, when it's floating around, when it bumps into other of these molecules, it acquires them as a negative. Of themselves, so the opposite molecule of themselves, and basically you have something, if you can see, has two halves. It's somewhat similar to DNA, but this is going to be a far cruder molecule, far cruder even than RNA. Now all this stuff that's breaking down these bonds splits this molecule down the middle, as you can see there. So what ends up happening then is that within this, it breaks down into its two component parts, as you can see there. Okay, now imagine those two component parts go bumping into other bits and other pieces of the chemicals that are there. And basically re-negative themselves, basically recreate the opposite of them by bumping into these other molecules. And obviously the chemical compounds, the oxygen, all that stuff conspires to split those. Okay, now think about this. In the midst of this, some of these chemicals are going to get mixed up. And in some cases, of course, what's going to end up happening is that what you're going to have is dead molecules, molecules that can no longer do this negative positive photocopying of each other. But some of them are going to actually be able to photocopy themselves better or faster, or live longer, stay together longer, which actually seems like an impediment, and it probably would have been at this particular point, but maybe not a little bit later. Now you can easily imagine that the occasional mutation of this that was positive, that made it easier to replicate, those new molecules would be the ones that started taking over and becoming in more proportion, having taking up more of the resources because of that. And now when you think about that, eventually what you'll have is a more complex system, and a more complex system of self-replicating molecules similar to this, until the points where they can utilize the amino acids to create proteins, the proteins that can help them break themselves apart and pick up things from outside and put them together to recreate themselves far more efficiently than the original molecule that just had to do it by chance. But the good thing about the chance was there's so many similar molecules that it was easy to pick them up. But they were unable to continue this bond due to the fact that all these harsh things in there that wanted to break these bonds down were there. And it's easy to see when you think about it this way how this could have happened. Now, I'm no biologist. I don't have a PhD in chemistry. And this is just a hypothesis based on the information I've been able to obtain. That is what my opinion, a likely scenario of how life got started. In fact, as my hypothesis put forth, that you would actually have to have all these negative things, the tar, the oxygen, some sort of breakdown, some sort of thing to break these molecules down. Because think about it, there's nothing to break them down when they came together. They'd never split apart. But what happens is that they get broken down, and then they float around, and then they collide with other parts. They remake new copies of themselves, and those break apart, a positive and a negative, and then they float around and then come together. And some of them aren't quite the same. Some of them, like I said, mutate a little bit, and some of those mutations are better. Some of them make the molecules dead and unable to continue to replicate. And this is the beginning of heredity. This is the beginning of DNA. This is the beginnings of adding information to the system of DNA that eventually becomes DNA. As I said earlier, this isn't even RNA. This is something probably far more simple than we even understand could do something like this. It's something highly simple, and we may have even seen this happen in real life, just not noticed it because it's something so odd. But this is my hypothesis, and I hope if anyone actually has true credentials, and I might actually like to see those if you might want to do that, but I'd like to see your credentials, and I'd like to hear anybody's opinions on whether this sounds feasible, whether it doesn't sound feasible. Don't anyone make fun of my crude drawings, because I warned you they're pretty crude. Anyway, that's all I had to say. I welcome your opinions. This has been Stone Dog.